Cool.
Cool. Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen. This is Leonard for TUGE, the Ultimate Growth Experience, and I'm really pleased to have my good friend Radi Baboe back here. Hey, welcome back, man.
Thanks, man. Happy to be here. Glad it's still going. A lot of people start podcasts, but you've been consistent with it and something I admire.
Not really. I haven't really done a proper podcast since April last year, just hustling in with the job and all that sort of stuff, right? But I'm glad to make this the first episode for 2021, and you've been a close friend of mine for a long, long time, and it seems like that you've gone in a very, you could say, stoic journey, as far as I'm concerned. So tell us about.
Yeah.
So you've done that internship and work with Microsoft. You graduated from the University of Auckland. Um, Tell us what's been happening, like for 2020 and
Yeah,
2021.
for sure. So 2020 was supposed to be my year of travel. I had planned and dreamed and made an itinerary, and I'd emotionally invested in traveling for the entire year. I planned to hit all the continents and do everything. Like Machu Picchu. I already like pre-booked for or I had pre-booked to do Mount Everest base camp. Like all those things, all those experiences I had on my list. And obviously with COVID, that didn't happen. And so I got back here when that all happened around March last year, and just kind of sulked for 2 weeks in self isolation, thinking, there goes my whole year, and this is just really bad, not on my plans. But then after I got out of self isolation, I was like, okay, let's make the most of this. What can I do? I knew I didn't want to go back to work, back to working immediately. I knew I still wanted that time to just kind of away from that whole world. And I decided that, I want to build the habits that I've always been putting off. So I built a reading habit, writing habit, all the things around kind of reflection and meditation and, being present. So turning off all my like social media. I went for like 3 months with just like no social media at all, which was kind of interesting because it was during lockdown as well, right? So I didn't even touch my social media during that first lockdown. I was just like reading. I was completely in my own world. I was not, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, nothing, Twitter, nothing. I was like completely in my own space, and that was really nice. And in in all that time that I had free, because I kind of opted out of this digital world, I did so much reading and so much writing, all of which has been captured now on a blog that I made. So it pretty much captures my journey in terms of what I had been thinking at the start of lockdown, at the start of this whole this new world order that we're in, up till now, because I've been pretty consistent with updating it, and I feel very I feel like my posts are very authentic because the audience I'm writing to is myself first
Mm.
and foremost. Like I didn't write those things because I want other people to read them. Honestly, I couldn't care less if no one else read them but me. But my thinking in putting them online was, if it helps at least one person, down the line in the 100 years that I pay for the hosting, then that will be worth the effort of me, going through the logistics of putting it online and stuff. And so through the vehicle of doing just way more reading than I thought I ever could, and way more writing and way more reflecting, I feel like I don't know, I've unlocked a new set of values, a new set of priorities, which if you were to ask me a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that Radi would not be able to recognize where I am now in terms of kind of priorities, goals, yeah, habits, things like that. So that's kind of been 2020 in a nutshell.
That's amazing, mate. So you started a blog, you read tons of books, you went on a meditation retreat, you cut off social media, you built new habits. My goodness. So like, is it a mindset shift, or is it a more of like something that you always wanted to do and you decided just to take priority on that step?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot actually. I thought about, would I do these things if I had the burden of studying full time or working full time? And after a long period of kind of sleeping on that, I realized no, I would not. Just because you wouldn't have the energy to really dedicate yourself to build kind of all these habits simultaneously. You could build, one or two of them, and certainly be consistent with that, but they would be on the fringes of your priorities, and your energies would not be, your energies that you put towards them would definitely not be as much as you would, as kind of I've been able to. And I know that I'm coming from a privileged position, like having being able to save up, money during university and being able to take this time off. Like I know not everyone is able to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but like for me, I'm really glad that I took the step, because when COVID first hit, I was really uh, scared is not the right word, but I was really regretting, like, oh, I should have opted for stability. I should have taken a job, because at least, on all this uncertainty, I would have that to fall back on. But now coming through the other side of it, 9 months later plus, like I feel so vindicated in the choice that I made to take this time off, because I feel like I would have made all of these kind of all of this progress with regards to how I see the world, how I interact with the world, my priorities and stuff. I feel like I would have made that progress, but over a longer time span. So instead of like going through all this sort of evolving and becoming in the space of 9 or so months, I would have gone through that over the space of like, 30, 40 years. And I would have just dragged it out. So I'm
Mm.
glad that I kind of got it all out of the way. Not to say that I'm like enlightened or anything, but I feel like the bulk of, a lot of my thinking around, like the important things in life, right? Like people around you, your health, your mental and physical, and kind of the whole purpose of life thing, like what drives you, that sort of thing. I've
Mm-hmm.
just had so much time to acutely focus on those questions that I feel like, well, I don't have a conclusive answer that I can whip out in an elevator in 30 seconds. I do have that grounding and that framework to be able to look back on, because now I can just query my blog and say, okay, what do I think about this question? And inevitably I would have like two or three things related to my previous thoughts on the question of how would I spend my time if I had all the money in the world, for example. Whereas, if I didn't go through this whole process, every time I would encounter that question, either naturally in the environment or if I choose to sit on it, I would have to start from scratch every time. Like, okay, it's like doing blah, blah, blah. And you'd be so influenced by the people around you, right? Depending on whether, like in school, in the school that we went to, high school, like it was all pretty elitist. And so everyone was super ambitious, and that's a cool thing to be and to be like that. But like, ambition has its drawbacks as much as it can push you forward.
Mm.
And, it depends on so many environmental things, like your answer. But now I feel like I've built a sort of foundation outside of any external environments I may be in. So while I may be swayed by, if I were to have a circle of friends that were particularly ambitious, which I feel like I used to, my answers to questions would be influenced by that, their aspirations and their thinking, because that's kind of what I'm hearing, because
Mm.
that's the chat I'm hearing, which is a natural thing. It's a natural phenomenon, right? But now I feel like, yeah, I've had the time to really think about what is it that I think about these things. I set that in stone in writing, and so if I ever want to query myself, like what was I thinking, you know, in June 2020, I can just like have a look, and that's
Mm.
just been a really nice thing to come out of this whole thing, is that I've basically documented my thinking this last year, which is more useful. The more time passes, the more useful it becomes, because it's really nice to be able to ask yourself, what did I think about, this question or that question? But yeah, that's kind of how I'm seeing everything at the moment.
Because it seems like that you and I have gone in like, how do I say? Because I started off with the huge, the habit building, the personal development stage during around 2018, 2019 when I interviewed you, and obviously you and I have talked about these topics back and forth many, many times. Whereas you went from that hustle, ambition, career focus to now towards these, you could say, foundational elements of building that ability to be happy, to look after your mental and health and well-being perspectives and understanding yourself. I think that's the thing that you're doing, is that you're really trying to understand who you are and what sort of pathway you're molding through these developments that you've done. I mean, you're obviously not earning income, although as I've told you many, many times, Radi, you are overqualified. So if you just apply somewhere like that, you'll get it. So
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that's a really nice duality there, actually. Like, yeah, I feel like we have started from different ends of the spectrum and then probably crossed over at some point last year, and yeah, which is which is nice because I feel like, you know, I really admire you for taking that time, earlier on before you kind of, because I think the way that you did it is probably the way that I would advise other people to do it. Because even though I don't regret kind of prioritizing the things I did the last few years, and I enjoyed doing them. One reflection that I've had again and again is that while I was doing that, I always felt a little bit like an imposter, in the sense that a lot of those ambitions about trying to uh, find success, whether through academia or in the working world, I felt like an imposter because I couldn't truly say that was what I wanted to do. Now I didn't have the terminology or the language to 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 explain this at the time, but after writing a lot about it, like that was the feeling that I had. Like, even though it was like, oh yeah, I can do this, I can find it, satisfying. It's like tick some goals, like you get endorphins and stuff, and then like you have this crowd around you that's like pushing you forward. Oh, apply for this, apply for that, blah blah blah. I could never truly say it's like, oh yeah, this is what I wanted to do, irrespective of the consequences that may occur after it. Like, whereas now I have a better idea of like, yeah, like I would want to do those things, but not for the reasons I did it before, which was kind of informed by the people around me and the environment around me, kind of pushing us towards you know climbing that ladder, which is not great.
I think it depends on the context, though. I mean, I would say, Radi, I think I got very lucky, is that I was able to find the right books and find the right people at the right time, which I would say the chance of that was one in a million for most people. I'm working at an institution where all my colleagues are top class economists and professionals that I feel dumb, by the way, Radi. So it's a good sign. Like, I'm not saying it's a good sign
Sure.
in a sense that I'm not the smartest guy in the room, which typically was the case when I was studying at Auckland, but now it's the exact reverse. But if I could chime in from that point you mentioned, that idea that, you wish you didn't hustle the way you did. I think you still need to be in an environment where people are either as competent as you are or smarter than you, because I think too many people right now get stuck in you could say, the networks they have, who are probably letting them down, who are probably not as driven and happy and healthy as they could be. Like, Radi, I think I've told you this many times. I'm a big believer in the networks theory. So I think that's the reason why you are where you are right now. And the personal development I think you and I both have had, obviously in a different path, in a sense of the way that we've tried to mold our lives in this way have been different, but the ultimate goal is all I think broadly very similar. But like you're obviously very passionate about, economics and statistics and other fields. So tell me what other fields you've been looking into, because you told me you've been reading Jonathan Haidt's book. What is it? Right
Yeah.
Mind. I'm fascinated
Yeah,
by it.
yeah, let me just pull up my list, because I honestly, I've read so I've enjoyed everything that I'm reading, but I often find it hard to recall what I've read, because I've honestly just read so much. So a neat thing that I did recently was I tried to track down every book that I read before lockdown last year, like in my life, and I was able to like get a rough number, and I think it was around 50 or something, and that was including stuff that they made us read in school, right, for like English or what have you.
Great Gatsby.
And yeah, Great Gatsby, stuff like that. And in the last year, I've read like I think I'm about up to 80 or 90 at the moment since
Wow.
lockdown. And like, I didn't choose books based on length. Like I didn't want to. The goal of reading a lot of books was not part of my motivation. It was like, what did I find interesting? And a lot of what I found interesting was honestly a lot of fiction. So 50% of what I had read this past year has been fiction. I would say another 20% is like autobiographies, memoirs. I love a good memoir. And then the rest are kind of historical, philosophical, psychological. So I guess I can pick a few books that have really like stood out. The first one, actually, I can just go to my favorite shelf. That's a lot easier, actually. Give me a sec. So the one that has really just like killed it for me is yeah, I mean, Righteous Mind. Now that I've read it, I'm just like, this is the best thing since sliced bread. The whole idea, the fact that it's given me the language and the terminology to assess and evaluate why people have the convictions that they do with respect to whatever political opinion they have or economic whatever, like that. I just feel that so powerful. I'm just so used, and I feel like I'm just gonna like keep referring back to it in conversations in future. So that's one that's really just like, but that was a very recent one, so I don't know how I feel about it a month from now, 3 months from now. But other books that's just like really had an impact is so Ernest Hemingway, yeah, a famous writer, American writer. He wrote a memoir about his time in Paris, but after World War I, where he was served as a soldier, and he was writing his first book, A Sun Also Rises. Sun Also Rises is a great book, and I read it, but like the memoir is like something else. It basically is a very romanticized version of what it's like to write literature. So his whole life was, he had his partner, I forget her name, but he wakes up every day, has breakfast with her partner, and he has a kid as well. And then he goes to the cafe and he writes all day. And in these cafes, it was like the high amazing writers and artists and stuff congregating at the same cafes in Paris just to like, just to chat shit about like art and stuff. And like that was his whole, spend time with family and stuff. And like I was just so enamored when I first read that book. I was like this is it. This is like peak life. Like you have something you enjoy you do during the day. You have your family that you come back into. And each of those things you do not because you're trying to strive for some bigger thing, right? Hemingway didn't write a book because like he wanted to become a bestseller. He wrote it because like he felt compelled to write. He felt like this is his contribution to the world. And I found that so, it's like a very simple memoir in that sense, but I just found it so powerful, especially for when I read it, which was very early on after lockdown. I was like, I had all these ambitions to travel and stuff and have all these experiences, but then that book really grounded me. Like, okay, I could just write all day and read, and like that is a perfectly acceptable substitute for gallivanting around the world. Like I probably have a similar amount of a similar experience in terms of like exposure to new ideas and new experiences and stuff like that, right? So that's been like the book that's like probably number one. And then a bunch of other fiction. And the other one is Atomic Habits. Have you read that book?
James Clear, yes.
James Clear?
Yes. I haven't read the book. I've listened
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
a number of his podcasts. It's a very simple concept, right? It's the idea that you break down habits from macro totally to micro and make it manageable so that it's so that you have an environment where it makes it how do I just say this? Least resistance to building that habit, like having like a shoe, something like that, right next to your, your bed or something, so that you can just slip on and then just go for a run. Something like that is. I know the concept, I know the thesis, but I haven't read it.
Yeah, so I wouldn't even I recommend people just read the first chapter, because so the first chapter is about his the foundation on why he thinks habits should be prioritized in kind of people's lives. The rest of the book is just like tactics, techniques, stuff that you can do tangibly to build good habits, break bad ones. That one, all that content is like, you can find it elsewhere. But his framing of like why habits are important, I just thought was just like next level. So the idea is that he frames habits more, instead of habits being something that you do every day. So, habits that we all have are like we eat every day at certain times, we sleep every day at certain times. Those are habits, whether we want to or not. Like we build habits, good or bad. We brush our teeth later at night or earlier in the day. Those are all habits. But the idea that kind of flipped the switch for me was he said that we need to stop thinking of habits as kind of checking a box every day, but instead frame it so that when you build a habit, the idea is you're trying to transform the way that you see yourself. So, for example, you can take a really boring example like brushing your teeth twice a day, right? You don't want to be the person that brushes their teeth in the morning and the evening at 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. Checking those boxes is not the goal. The goal is to do it enough that you transform your thinking of yourself so that you see yourself as a person who brushes their teeth twice a day. Like it's a very subtle framing, but like that really changed the game for me. And so if you take it up to a more extreme example, like what's a more extreme habit, people a lot of people want to do meditation, right? But like they don't have time, they're not disciplined, blah blah blah. And so instead of thinking of a meditation habit as being meditating for 10 minutes, have it so that yes, the goal is to meditate for 10 minutes every day, but then the longer term, I suppose, thing that you're trying to enforce is that you want to start thinking of yourself as I'm the type of person that meditates for 5 minutes every day, or I'm the type of person that meditates for 10 minutes. And because once you have that self-conception of yourself, it's like, water off your back. Like it no longer becomes there. All the friction ceases to exist, because like you think yourself as the type of person that does that, and so you just do it, right? Like it's like like how you treat people that you don't know. Like if you think yourself a nice person or think yourself a kind and thoughtful person, you would try to act pretty cordially and pretty politely in those sorts of exchanges. But if you think of yourself as if you don't really care about that, if you think of yourself as not a mean person, but as someone who has a goal and like will do ends justifies the means, if that's kind of how you see yourself, then you might not care about those interactions, right? And so that was the thing that just like got me to buy on James Clear and Atomic Habits. Like once you change your self-conception of yourself as being I'm the type of person that does X or Y, whatever X or Y may be, that just changes the game, because that applies to it, literally everything, right? Take it, if we put aside personal life, work in your working lives, right? Like you want to be the person that is a good team player, takes the initiative, becomes a leader when necessary. Like all those things are habits that you need to build. All those things are beliefs that you need to build for yourself. And the only way that you can build those habits or build those beliefs within yourself is to do it as often as possible. And that's kind of what he says the rest of the book, like trying to make it as frictionless as possible. But yeah, Atomic Habits, like I've recommended to like almost everyone that I met and that I've caught up with, just because it's such a simple thing, and it's such a seemingly innocuous and insignificant thing, but it's not. You know what I mean?
I fully agree.
Like if this was like a uni class or like a high school class, like, if you just took one class and call it that your uni degree, just take this class, because like this is it. Like I would have, yeah, things would have been a lot easier if I made if I acknowledged that distinction between just doing things to do things versus doing things to change the way that you see yourself.
Makes total sense. That's, I think, what you mentioned is sort of like the difference between one person looking at it from a strategic perspective versus just being genuine, like genuinely
Yeah.
framing and thinking about what we could be by visualizing that ideal to our minds through that habit. Whereas, like you said, just meditate for 10 minutes. Hey, whereas, no, I'm trying to be that person that is calm, that is stoic, that is this.
Yeah.
By that. Yeah.
Yeah, because like once you have that self-conception, you'd be disappointed in yourself if you didn't, at least try to meditate, right? Like that is the biggest motivator, right? Like that feeling of shame almost. Like if that is conferred by external sources, by friends or family, then that's one thing. But it's a lot more powerful when you feel ashamed of yourself, of like not living up to the way that you see yourself. But yeah, that's Atomic Habits is an old time favorite of mine. Just because it changed the way that I think about everything.
So those are the 3-4 books that you've been thinking about a lot lately? Or do you have two
Those
more?
are like dude, I have a lot of books. It's just like I could just ramble on about them, honestly. But a lot of them are like fiction, so it's not as like the lessons from them are not as communicable as kind of nonfiction books, just because a lot of the fiction books I have my favorites list, like I love them because of the way that they made me feel. But then if I just share that, it doesn't give a lot of context to how it actually does it or why. But I'll just say some names. My favorite like fiction book of all time, probably favorite book of all time, is a book called A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. It's a book about friendship at the end of the day. So a group of 4 friends just finished university. They all moved to New York, and it follows their friendship over the course of 30 years. And one of the people in the group, Jude, he has kind of concealed his childhood from the friend group since they've known each other, and it's over the course of these 30 years that the other 3 friends kind of uncover and realize like how traumatic a childhood he's had, and it's about those 3 friends kind of helping him along and kind of realizing and acknowledging the weight that he's been able to carry and he's had to carry since that. And I just found it to be such a powerful testament on friendship, because a lot of the characters, like I've read a lot of fiction books, like almost 50 in the last year, and like I don't remember character names at all, but I remember like the character names in this book because I just was so emotionally invested in them. But yeah, that A Little Life, like, would highly like cannot recommend it highly enough. And then I would say if I had to pick one more, it would be, do you know Haruki Murakami, the Japanese writer?
I've heard of her. Yeah, I've heard of that person.
Yeah, so I've only read one of his books, but I found his memoir to be like as game changing as Atomic Habits. It's a very similar. So he's known in the wider world as a running novelist. That's kind of his brand. Like his whole life is centered around, he wakes up at 4 a.m., writes for 6 hours until 10 a.m. Then he has like brunch with his wife and stuff and kids. And then he goes runs like 10, 15K. And then in the afternoon, he's like free to do whatever he wants. Often he reads, catches up with friends, blah, blah, blah. But like, I just love the way that he approaches kind of what he does for a living, because before he was a writer, he was a jazz club owner because he really loved jazz. And like, he was like, he had no compunction and no hesitation to really invest and fully dive into, you know, the things that really made him whole. You know, it's different from like trying to strive for happiness, because happiness is very, I don't know, I feel like it's very fraught and shallow term, just because so many people see in so many different ways. And so what I like most about his memoir is that, you know, for a lot of the chapters, like, you wouldn't say objectively that he was happy pursuing this jazz club dream or even pursuing the writing thing, but he felt whole, you know, doing it. And that's just, I don't know, I just fell in love with the way that he kind of verbalized all these things, because it was exactly the same sort of conundrums that I was facing. But like, when I read what he wrote, I was like, yes, yes, this is me. Yes, like, even though I probably won't be a fiction writer anytime soon, but you know, I really love the way that he's kind of, I suppose, set up his life in that way. Because now, like, I have pretty much I have his working schedule. Like, I wake up at 4 a.m. and I do my exercise first, but then I usually work through to like midday-ish, and then that leaves, you know, work, as in like, for me that's just like reading and writing and, you know, like doing all that stuff. But so after midday, like, I feel so satisfied that I've been able to, one, you know, get a run in or whatever in the morning and do all that for 8 hours or so, that I feel so chuffed that I have no had no guilt with like doing whatever I want after 12. And so oftentimes I'll continue just reading. But sometimes I'll just, like, you know, do stuff that would be like conventionally unproductive. But that's okay, because I've put in kind of my shift for the day. And I can be wholly satisfied, you know, in the 8 hour period in the morning. And so in the afternoon, like, I can really just like chill. And it's just like weight off my shoulders type of thing, right? Whereas, you know, I see all my friends like working, like, a lot of them work flexibly, right? They can work whenever they want. But I do like having that routine of 4 to 12 is pretty like set in stone. I'm going to be productive. And then the rest of it, like, I can just enjoy.
So you follow that author's lifestyle, practically waking up at 4, working till noon, and then doing what the heck you want to do.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a nice compromise of yeah, having that routine and having that time to be idle and to be spontaneous. Because I think that's another learning from this past year, is like just how much I value uh the state of being idle, such that, you know, spontaneity can kind of bloom from that. Because a lot of the things that I discover are because, like, in terms of books and like maybe movies I want to watch, or, you know, new websites, new blogs and stuff, a lot of those are discovered when I am idle.
Idle.
Find some new books, you know, add some to the list. Let's try to find some new blogs. And like, if I did that with the weight of knowing that I had more work to do,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's not as fun. And I don't think I would have been as effective in finding those new forms of media, I suppose, to really, you know, spice everything up.
I think I lost you vaguely for a second there, but I think I get where you're coming from now. Is that, so you're saying you're able to be present when you consume these contents, when you're writing, or these podcasts,
Yeah,
or these blogs, or
I suppose the way I frame it now is I can be like almost like irrationally intentional with whatever I'm doing, because I've kind of trained myself out of checking my phone. um, I can be really just like laser focused in on whatever it is I'm doing. So if that is finding new music to add to my Spotify playlist, I will do that, 100% focus or whatever it may be, but it's reading or writing, like 100%. There's nothing that has that will distract me, because I spent months like training myself to be like that. With the whole no phone thing. And then now I've turned on all the social media and stuff, but like I don't fall into the same habits of like feeling the urge to check it, for example, when I'm like waiting for a bus or like waiting for friends to arrive, for lunch or whatever. Like I don't feel the urge to check it, which is like, yo, this is great. Instead, I'll just like, have a look around and like take in the world, as opposed to pulling out the phone. That's probably like one of the more satisfying like things, like specific experiences that I've had this past year.
That ability to be in the flow state, that ability to be in that content mental mode is something that I really envy about you at the moment. Because for me, I've gone in the exact opposite direction, in the sense of, being able to keep the habits, right? I still read, obviously, as part of my profession. I still listen to podcasts, obviously, as part of who I am as a person. But in terms of, you could say, like, I realize this, Radi. I'm 24 now. I've just started my career, and it seems like that all those good work that I've done in like 2-3 years ago is sort of gradually sort of either stagnating or not necessarily in hyper development. Like, I'm not able to be in the flow state. I still get distracted. I had like 12, 13 tabs on my computer when I work, and it's like, hang on a minute, something is going on. That's something that I think I'll need to pay more attention to. I want to actually return to
I've actually sorry,
go ahead.
No, I just want to say that I've thought a lot about like what you just brought up in terms of when you have I don't want to call work a burden, but like when you have the metaphorical burden of like work that you have to do, like it is tough. And I've tried to like attack it at all angles. Like, how can you have the best of, having all these things that give you life and give you joy, as well as, excelling in your work responsibilities or family or whatever. And like at the end of it, I was like, you just can't. You just have to be like really, really hyper focused with what you want to focus in terms of what you want to develop and what you want to continue to develop. And so like for me, I accept that when I get back into work rather, I will not be able to sustain the level of discipline that I have now with respect to all the things that I'm doing. And so I've made steps to choose and to whittle down, okay, these are the 2 or 3 things that I'm really going to focus on. And, I'm going to, do the other things on the weekend if I'm feeling up for it when I have time. And you just have to be okay with that, because you need to make a living, right? Like it's no 2 ways about it.
It's a trade-off, my friend. It's a trade-off. I mean, this is why I think, when we look at the likes of Tim Ferriss or the likes of Robert Greene and even Ryan Holiday, I think how they are able to maintain all of this and have that, passive income coming in through their books, through their content, is something that I think not everybody gets to do, because most people are going to be trading, you could say, having a trade-off between what you and I talked about, contentment and being fully present and developing those, you could say, mental capacity to really being immersed with our own being, versus struggling and keeping and coping with society and meeting these stakeholders and going into business conferences. It's unfortunate, isn't it, is that in life that we can't necessarily have all of that unless you're super super duper motivated to get that lifestyle like Tim Ferriss. But I wanted to, sorry for interrupting you in the middle of that, but I wanted to go back to the topic of happiness, because I think there is something that I sort of vaguely talk about with my friends, Radi, is the ongoing trend of excessive nihilism and hedonism, and people not able to cope with cope with, you could say, the present world, and not necessarily looking at the world from like a long-term perspective, right? Like, we look at these habits because we know these are going to pay off some way or another. And do you think society today is focusing too much on conceptual happiness rather than, you could say, what some people might define as long-term happiness, or in another way in which, Dr. Jordan Peterson described it as meaning, like, meaning, responsibility, purpose, or life objective?
Yeah. When I kind of started reading around this stuff, like happiness, meaning, purpose, like for me, that's all the same sort of thing, right? You're trying to find that balance in your lifestyle that it makes you feel whole and makes you feel satisfied, and and all that. Now, one way to look at it, and one way I have looked at it, is like from a scientific, like a biological perspective, right? Like I read like 5 or 6 books about evolutionary psychology, and like looked at it from that perspective.
Excellent.
Just in terms, that was kind of one of my rabbit holes that I went into. But if you look at it from that perspective, or rather, I kind of went away from the whole meaning, purpose, happiness thing as the center of my focus, because it was just too abstract. Like, like eating a chocolate chip cookie will give you happiness, right? It'll give you that, it's just really
Dopamine.
nice. And obviously you can think about longer term happiness and blah, blah, blah. But the way that I decided to, I chose to frame it is like in terms of finding your infinite game. Have you heard the idea of like finite games versus infinite games?
No, I haven't.
So I think it comes from game theory, maybe. So a popular, I want to say, motivational speaker slash business guru dude, Simon Sinek, wrote a book about infinite games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Start with why.
I kind of borrowed. Yeah. Start with why. But I like the framing of the infinite game as something to strive for, because by definition, an infinite game is something that you do and you continue to do for the sake of being able to keep doing it. Whereas a finite game, you're playing to win objectively, whether that's win, whatever you measure winning by, like that's the goal. And so for me, when I learned of this framework of the infinite game, I kind of thought it had really nice applications to the lifestyle that I've been able to build. Because if I think about it, if I had all the money in the world and I didn't have to worry about work, like, what kind of life would I build? What would my priorities be? What would I do to spend the time, right? That is the infinite game, essentially. Because all of the things that I'm doing now, and all the things that you would be doing if you had the financial security to not care about money, is like you would be doing them for the sake of doing them, not for the sake of trying to further some other thing. So with the writing that I do, I'm doing it for the sake of doing it, and the ability for me to keep doing it is the goal. I don't have a goal of like amassing a huge audience online. I don't have a goal of writing a best-selling book. None of that. It's like I write for me. I share it online. Some other people, read it. That's cool. But like the fact that I write for myself, and the fact that I can have the space and the time to write from, that's the goal. And so everything else that I've kind of built in terms of the habits, and ultimately kind of built this lifestyle, like I would keep doing them irrespective of, or I would want to keep doing it irrespective of everything else. And so for me, like that's the infinite game, and that's what I think people are trying to verbalize when they say, they're searching for happiness and stuff. Because happiness, you got to look at it from the bird's eye view, right? You got to take a step back to look at whether or not you would want to live someone's life, for example. Like if you think about like people that are what's the word, like not glamorized, but like Elon Musk, right? Like famous celebrities and stuff. Like if you ask people, would you want to live like so and so, insert their role model or insert, most people would say yes. And that is flawed, I think, because obviously we see all the good stuff, right? We see the headlines that they're billionaires or that they live these lavish lifestyles. But then what you don't see is like maybe all the mental health issues that they face as a result of being in the spotlight. And like if you live the life and if you live the day in their shoes, you probably would say no, I'm perfectly happy in kind of lifestyle that I am. And so like that's how I've kind of framed things. Like you want to optimize for your lifestyle so that you can keep doing what you want to do for the sake of doing it and not for the sake of, furthering any other kind of extrinsic goal.
Yeah, I think, well, it's the tip of the iceberg sort of metaphor, right? Is that the good stuff you see versus the bottom, which is the nitty gritty, the hard work, the as you said, the mental health stuff, the overworking. I mean, these people are top performers working 120 hours a week, not a lot of sleep, not a lot of family life, not a lot of social life. Actually, because Radi, I'm based in Wellington, right? I talk to some uni students that tell me, oh, I want to be an MP, I want to be a minister, I want to do this. And the thing that sort of gets to me is that I told them, listen, being an MP, because I talk to a lot of MPs through my job, right? It's not paradise as the way that they think. They have to go to so many community events. They need to be at the house from 9 to like 12 a.m. sometimes, for working literally 14 hours a day just to try and get bills passed and deal with stakeholders within Parliament and the House. And then you have the political drama of, trying to see, who's trying to knife me, who's trying to do this, that. And it's only 3 years. It's not like you're there permanently. It depends on how people react to you. So you need to deal with social skills. And you're right, is that people look at the glamour. They don't necessarily look at the dedication, you could say, the work, the grit, and the pain that comes out of that too. So we need to pick our battles, right? Is that we need to figure out, well, I'm saying contextualizing it on our own way, rather than looking at models like Elon Musk and thinking, I just want to be like Elon. It's like, well, do you want the negative stuff and the positive stuff too? Do you want to be like Warren Buffett, where you're reading investment newspapers and books every day without looking at anything else? Are you really determined and committed to that? And if the answer is no, well, you got to find something else.
I read I listened to an interview with Michael B. Jordan that I think like had a quote. He said something that just really stuck with me in like the 5 years since I've seen that thing. And it was like, to be like successful in like the 0.001%, whether you're an actor or investment banker or whatever it is, like you really have to be comfortable with being alone, because a lot of that time working on your craft, like that is stuff that you do alone. And while actors, like you see them when they have their highs and their premieres and stuff, like you don't see the hundreds, thousands of hours that they spend alone reading scripts and thinking about how they would say this one innocuous line in a script 100 different ways. And so to better evaluate like whether or not you'd want to live someone's life, you really have to look at it in terms of what do they actually do every day. If they spend 8 hours looking at a script because they're an actor of some variety, and you really love doing that, and if that's something that you dig, then great. But if you choose because of like all the external stuff, then recipe for disaster.
Well, this is why we need more people that try to figure out their, you could say, ideal vision, and looking at like role models from a holistic context rather than just that superficial stuff, as we mentioned. But yeah, final question for you, Radi. So what are your plans for the next few months? It seems like that you've had a lot of personal growth since I interviewed you last time, a lot of changes. It seems like that your perspective and your views in the world have just fundamentally shift in some way. I don't think you're the only one. I think our mutual friend Chris Hagen probably faced that, you could say, euphoria himself too. But so what's your plan? What's coming up? What's next for Radi Baboe?
Yeah. So for me, I've kind of realized that I should probably like get back into the working world. And so that's kind of the focus, I suppose, or the emphasis over the next little while, is try to find something that, like, my priority when looking for work, for a job, is to be able to protect as much of what I've built in kind of, all the stuff that we've talked about, right? And so for me, that would be flexible working is like, if there's no flexible working, like it's off my list. The ability to work remotely and things like that. And then in terms of like the actual company, or the area or the industry, like I'm pretty open, because I've realized that one of the learnings that I've had this year is like, how like you ask kids like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or like when people give advice about what people should do, it's like, oh, do what you like, what are you passionate about, blah, blah, blah. I just find that to be so just so bad, because like passions are not things that we have inherently. Like we're not innately passionate about the things we are. Like you develop those passions, right? And so for me, being as young as we are, just like a year or two outside of university, I know that I can develop a passion for whatever industry or whatever it is, so long as you have all those pieces in place in terms of great company culture, good leadership, just good people around. Like I feel like I can fully commit to that, and so that's kind of my thinking around looking for work. But yeah, aside from that, protecting as much as I can what I built, the lifestyle I've built, and yeah, that's kind of what's next.
I
I'm
think
living my ultimate game, without need to change anything.
well, live your life with the multidisciplinary approach of Charlie Munger, Radi.
Yeah.
The idea of
Yeah.
keeping all of the knowledge and you could say, perspectives on utilizing every discipline, every profession you can, but obviously molding in that direction. Like I agree with you in the sense that view of find your passion is such a naive question, because we don't get passionate on something just by saying, oh, I'm passionate at this, and it's something that you acquire and learn and develop like a skill. Something that I'm facing myself right now. Just letting the viewers know that I've been recently getting into urban economics because of my profession. I need to get into the composition of cities, the housing, local government infrastructure, which is part of my role. I never knew any of this before. At uni, it was all about like actual politics, like political science. Whereas now it's just it's such a different world compared to where I was last year and today. And I think Radi is the same thing as well. And anyway, final word, Radi?
I don't know. I would really advise people check out Atomic Habits or A Little Life. Like those two books have, it's not an understatement to say that it changed the way that I think about everything. But yeah, that's what I would say.
Excellent. Radi, thank you very much for joining me today. I look forward to part 3 sometime in the next few months, hopefully. And by that point, you'll probably provide us with insights as to how you've been able to keep those productive habits that you built over the last year. And I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you so much for joining me, man. It's a pleasure, man.
Pleasure, man. Always
awesome.
A pleasure.
Thank you so much for the episode, man.
Beauty.
Sweet. Cheers, man.